Welcome everyone to part 2 of Couch Potato Diary today. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. This one is all about combat sports. We look at the boxing world after a gigantic fight with Beterbiev and Bivol part 2, plus the UFC with quite a few fight announcements, The Rock making an announcement, and then a bit of a declaration, we'll get into that, and AEW Dynamite from Wednesday. So, didn't get to a Friday podcast, so I wanted to do this today. As always, we're presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca for all that great Calgary swag, including this Calgary Cannons hat, and I guess specifically for what we're doing today, you're probably going to want to grab a Stampede Wrestling shirt over at seaofdead403.ca. Also, this is fueled by Swift Energy. Check out swiftenergy.gg. Use the code PKPrimetime for that 25% off to help with the focus and energy. And normally we do these live on twitch.tv/primetimepk. That not the case today. We are just doing just a regular old school kind of video that of course you can listen to over on Spotify as well as on Apple Podcasts. So with all of the blurb out of the way, let's get into some fight talk, as it was one of the deepest cards in the history of the sport this weekend out in Saudi Arabia. It was the rematch that we were all waiting for, Artur Beterbiev against Dmitry Bivol for the undisputed light heavyweight championship, and it did not disappoint. Just a fantastic fight, and a fantastic card, and we had a couple of issues. A couple guys pulling out because of illness within 48 hours of the fight. So it wasn't exactly what it could have been, but still a fantastic night of fights. Let's start from the top, and then we'll go back to the bottom and kind of work our way up. Artur Beterbiev against Dmitry Bivol. We have a new undisputed light heavyweight champion, as Dmitry Bivol comes away with the unanimous decision victory. Right? Oh, no, majority decision victory. Sorry. This was another just brilliant fight from both of these guys. And it was just such an exhibition of why these two are the two best in this division and two of the top 10 fighters in the world right now. Just period. End of story. It was fantastic. And the thing, we've talked about this a little bit before, where in the UFC or in MMA, if it's 3 rounds or even if it's 5 rounds, you don't really have time to get that story play out. In boxing, you do. And there was the story to this one. In the early going, Beterbiev, with that pressure and the power that he was he was able to take over by around the 3rd round and really get control of those middle rounds. And it's just this stalking nature. And when he is going, it's so tough to keep him off of you, and Bivol just couldn't really. And Bivol has such an amazing jab, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but there was no way of stopping Beterbiev as he was coming in, and he was kind of just walking him down and really landing some very clean, very big punches and starting to kind of take over as the fight was playing out. But then something switched for Dmitry Bivol. He really started using his movement, and that elite level jab that he had really started to set everything up and kind of stopping Beterbiev in his tracks, and allowed Bivol to get into that flow, get into that rhythm, and really start to take over as we got into the latter part of this fight and then into the championship rounds. It was an excellent showing from Dmitry Bivol and just showed everything that he could be. This was the best version of Dmitry Bivol that you could have possibly seen on Saturday night. It is, when it is going, it is crisp movement, all of the punches, like it's technically sound. And it was, we talked about it in the first one. It's oversimplifying it to say it's a brawler against a boxer, really, but that's what Bivol basically turned this into, is that he was using his slick style and his speed and his jab while Beterbiev was trying to hunt him down and trying to get things kind of brought back. And when you look at the scorecards, it's going to show like a couple of big chunks as like, okay, well, this guy dominated here and then this guy dominated here. And that wasn't always the case. It did kind of feel like a lot of these rounds were close, but it would just be like Beterbiev in a couple of them, I believe it was the 10th, Beterbiev is kind of walking him down and landing a few good punches and a few good shots, and he's kind of controlling the round, but then Bivol just sits down, lands a jab, and lands this 3-punch combo, and all 3 of those punches are the biggest punches that landed in that round. And so Beterbiev controlled probably 2.5 minutes of the 3-minute round, but Bivol the 30 seconds that he controlled were significantly more impactful than what Beterbiev did. And so he was able to win some rounds that way and really start to build that up and build up a bit of a nest egg for him as it was going on. It was an excellent game plan from Bivol, and for Beterbiev, like, he has fantastic power, but he did look slower, and he looked smaller than Bivol. And I mean, that's not new. We saw that in the first fight too, but like, Bivol was in incredible shape, and it was just, he was moving around, and Beterbiev just, he looked like the slower fighter in this one. And honestly, like, he looked like a 40-year-old fighter. And that's not to say I think he is old and washed by any stretch of the imagination. I think if Beterbiev fought that fight against almost anyone else in the world, he probably would have won. But Bivol was just on another level right now, and he got better as the fight went on. Bivol did, sorry. He paced himself in the middle rounds, and that really did help him as the fight kind of went on. And so he was, rightfully so, the champion again, in an undisputed fashion in the light heavyweight division. And so now what is next? We're going to officially talk about that for us on Friday's podcast and YouTube video, looking at the fights to make coming off of this gigantic fight card. First blush, I think you kind of got to do this again. Beterbiev, they asked him, do you want to do the third time? He's like, I didn't want to do it the second time. But Bivol talking about how he has a few injury issues and things like that. So maybe they take some time off. But I think you have to roll with this one again. And it puts Benavidez in a bit of a difficult spot that we had kind of talked about before. So a lot to kind of go through as we get ready for what is next for all of these guys. I do think that you should probably go with Bivol against Beterbiev one more time and just figure this whole thing out. If Bivol does want a little bit of extra time, I would imagine Beterbiev does too. I think when you see how his kind of career has gone, this was the quickest turnaround he had in a really, really long time. And I would imagine he wants a bit of a break as well. So I could see these guys just kind of stepping away from the picture for a little bit and letting a few other guys step up. So we'll see what happens coming off of that one. We stay in the light heavyweight division as we go to how the main card started. It was with Callum Smith taking on Joshua Buatsi in the light heavyweight division. This was an incredible fight. Honestly, a fight of the year candidate to start the show off. They both had some very, very good moments and both landed huge at various different points in this fight. And there were a lot of times, okay, this guy starting to pull ahead here. Oh no, now this guy's starting to pull ahead. Okay, no, you never really knew who was going to take it from one moment to the next. It was an incredible fight. Smith really starts to pull ahead with that great body work that he was doing, and really starting to dig those shots was really starting to pay off for him as the fight went on. And he was building up some momentum, and then he got absolutely drilled after a dominant round in the sixth, and that seemed like, it felt like that was the moment where Smith was about to take over, and then Buatsi comes back and just makes him cross-eyed for a sec and drills him with a picture-perfect punch that basically stopped that momentum in the tracks, and then it's back and forth we go again. And I think that was the real story of this fight, is that once it looked like one guy was starting to pull ahead, the other would just come in and land a hellacious blow and take the fight back for them. And then they're starting to build it, and then the other guy, a huge shot, and now they're bringing it, and it was that way back and forth the whole time. So no one was really able to pull ahead in this fight, which makes 119-110 one of the most ridiculous scorecards I have ever seen in my life. I tweeted it out at the time that it was the worst scorecard I've seen in my life. It was topped a few short hours later, but it was horrendous. That is a scorecard that you write down before the night starts. You have to give just every millisecond of every round, like just any possible swing moment. Nope, got to go to that guy. Like there's just no way you can do that. And so that was a real bummer. And it's something we talked about the last Bivol Beterbiev fight, where there was a bit of a cloud because of some judging controversies. And it pops up here after what was a fantastic fight. The right guy wins with Smith getting the victory, but this was a horrendous judges scorecard there. We then get to the big boys, as it was Zhilei Zhang taking on Ajit Kabayel in, again, a fun heavyweight, just slugfest. They both brought it early on. I thought Zhang was using his reach very, very effectively. Like, he is a monster of a human being, and he had that size. And so in the first round, anytime Caballel is coming in, he's landing a quick jab and landing a couple shots off of that, and kind of like keeping Caballel in his spot. And so he's using the size advantage that way, which is what I think you should do. But then Caballel kind of understood that and also recognized, like, I can deal with this. And if I can't, like, I'm going to lose anyway. So I have to get through this. And he kind of forced Zhang into a bit of a volume fight. And so, because he was constantly pressuring and constantly coming forward and trying to initiate, and he wasn't getting the better of these exchanges in the beginning because Zhang is countering immediately, landing a couple of quick shots and trying to keep him at bay. But Caballel was very smart in just making him do that a lot and starting to wear Zhang down a little bit. And so he is looking exhausted and looking worn out, and then still lands just a ferocious knockdown in the fifth round. Like, he does. He looks beat, but he still has that great power. And it was so interesting to watch him. Like, he's kind of in zombie mode. And then he just put 3 punches that are the most crisp, beautiful punches you've seen at heavyweight in a decade. And then he goes back to being a zombie. It's like, how did you... What? Like, where did that come from? And so he did that there in the fifth round, and still landing with that big power. And they were mentioning on the broadcast, like, if he's going to get any of these rounds, it's going to have to be in the first minute, because he would come out in the first minute and look good, and then it would start to wear. And then it would really start to wear, and it would break down, and then it ends up being what it was. But Caballel eventually... Zhang is just like, he doesn't have the jab. He doesn't have the volume or the power, again, to keep Caballel off of him for extended periods of time. Caballel is able to get inside, and then great work with the body shots, gets the body shot KO, and just an absolute show of pain by Zhang as he just rears back and just, after the shot, and he gets up at 10.5. But the fight is called at that point. Just very, very impressive performance from Caballel. Fantastic hand speed. He was really, really aggressive. And once he figured out how to get inside, it was wraps from that point on. He did an unbelievable job of doing that and kind of forcing Zhang, even while losing, forcing Zhang into a fight that he wasn't comfortable with and dragging him into some of those deep waters a little bit earlier on. So I thought a phenomenal game plan from the Caballel side. And once that really started to get going, Zhang just couldn't keep Caballel off of him as that fight went on. Israel Madrimov taking on Virgil Ortiz. This was another one. It was a very, very fun fight between these two and a very interesting chess match, as Madrimov is showing great movement early on. And Ortiz was kind of just chasing him for the whole time. And because Madrimov, it's the constant movement, it's the bouncing around, it's the circling around and everything like that, Ortiz is never able to settle in and land any of his shots. He's kind of just chasing him the whole time. And it's not really working out in that sort of a way. And so he's chasing him down and he's not able to settle up on any of his punches. And so Madrimov isn't doing a whole lot to win the fight, but Ortiz can't do a thing because he can't catch up to the guy. And so Madrimov is just landing these little shots and starting to accumulate these rounds. But then, like, it's tiring to do that. And I don't know if Madrimov just wore out or if he just decided he needed to start throwing with a bit more impact. But then it turned into a little bit more of a phone booth fight, and from there, Ortiz just took over. Ortiz's defense was really solid, really accurate with his power punches. Like, the second that Madrimov, either a hand would slip down because he's about to set something up, or just a moment of weakness or sloppiness or adjusting position or whatever, and the second that hand would come down just an inch, Ortiz was there with just a piston shot to really land on him very, very hard. But Ortiz covers up really well. The accuracy is excellent. I was saying before, I think the sky's the limit for this kid. I think that there is a very, very talented fighter in there, and Madrimov's a tough guy to look good against. This honestly, not that Terrence Crawford needs more of a boost, but this makes the Crawford performance back in August kind of makes a little bit more sense when you see how difficult it is for someone to look good against Madrimov. So it's an impressive showing still for Ortiz, as he was finally able to get Madrimov to settle down and settle into his fight. I would have liked to have seen Ortiz cut the ring off a little bit better instead of chasing, but it was still a really, really impressive performance. And Madrimov, he just couldn't deal with the pressure of Ortiz once it really started to slow, and you're just kind of being chased around the ring the whole time. He just couldn't deal with that power either in that bout. Then we get to another intriguing one. Carlos Adames taking on Hamza Shiraz in what will go down as a fight from this card. Shiraz, it felt like he was just one punch short on every combo that he was doing. And his promoter was getting up there and yelling, which we saw a lot in this. Don't do that. And I understand why you're doing that, but you could simply not. Like, if I'm a trainer, I want anything I can grab and just throw it at you. Like, I'm trying to give technical advice, and so I don't need you worrying about whatever and just be like, just come forward. Like, no, I'm trying to help this man not get bludgeoned to death and try to pick up a victory here. We can worry about you do the promoting later. Right now, this is our moment. So if you could kindly shut the hell up, that would be great. We saw way too many promoters getting into corners tonight. On Saturday afternoon. But Shiraz apparently had a broken hand. Like, it got pretty messed up, it seemed like, when they would just kind of cut to it. He was pretty messed up. And so because of that, he wasn't throwing in the way that you would want to. He has a really good jab, and he's really tall for this weight class. And so you could see why there was excitement level about him, or around him anyway. But it just felt like every time he would land a combo, you just wanted one more kind of exclamation point to put it forward. And instead, it was allowing Adames to kind of get inside and get that pressure up and start to steal these rounds, because the volume is kind of the same, because Shiraz is about one punch short, and it's the biggest one, and Adames has no problem landing the biggest ones. So it was, again, a very interesting chess match to watch and to see it play out, because Shiraz was having great effect with that jab, and you just wish that there was a bit more following it up. And potentially that is because of the handbrake, but you just wish there was a little bit more behind that to be able to kind of keep that pressure going for him and build a little bit of that momentum. Instead, it makes the volume matchup about 50-50, and Adames is getting inside and landing some great power shots. And again, really kept Shiraz on the back foot the whole time. And I thought really started to accumulate rounds. And again, another horrendous scorecard at the end of this, as it ends up being a draw. That there was, again, it was a close fight. Like, we're not talking 120, 109 or anything like that or 108, I guess, on this card. But it was very clear who the winner of this fight was. And for there to be two cards that went against that is just, it's inexcusable. It is horrendous. And it's not going to be a gigantic cloud over this whole thing, but again, it is going to be a bit of a frustration for a lot of fans, and at least a talking point coming out of what was otherwise a phenomenal card. And then we get to the fights that were altered by illness. Shakur Stevenson taking on Josh Padley. This was not supposed to be him. It was supposed to be Schofield, but Schofield was sick. His father suggested the poisoning may have been involved. But either way, Josh Padley steps in. He is a 40-1 underdog, as they said on the broadcast. And this, it was what it was. Padley wasn't going down without a fight. He was trying to be aggressive. The problem is you're going up against one of the best defensive fighters in the sport, and that's a problem. So, it didn't work for Padley. He was very clearly outgunned and outmatched. And Shakur Stevenson, some great work to the body, slowing things down. And he eventually does put this one away. The problem is another one where you have a fighter dealing with a hand injury. And so the people who are saying that Stevenson just toys with these fighters, he's not really putting guys away, he's not taking this seriously, he's not doing enough, blah, 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 blah. Those guys still have ammunition, because this fight probably went 3 or 4 rounds longer than it needed to, but Stevenson was dealing with that hand injury, and so he just couldn't follow up on some of these great situations that he was putting himself into, and that became a bit of the story of this fight. Again, he puts Padley away, he does the call out of Tank Davis after. That is going to be a fight that people are going to be talking about, especially with Davis now fighting this weekend. I think that would be an intriguing fight. I haven't seen a whole lot from Stevenson here that makes you think like, okay, well, now Tank Davis, watch out. But that's still going to be a very fun fight when these two finally lock horns. And then we get to the heavyweight encounter of the evening, as again, this was one of the fights that the whole card was built on. It was going to be Joseph Parker taking on Daniel Dubois. Dubois gets sick on Thursday. And so on 48 hours notice, Martin Bacoli steps in. And again, this fight was what you'd expect. It was awful. I mean, it wasn't awful, but it was not competitive. Parker showed great hand speed and technique. Bacoli came in at 315 pounds and just wasn't fight ready at all. He came in and got a paycheck. That's what he did. He was not ready for this fight, and most heavyweights aren't on 2 days' notice. I do think that there is a larger conversation to be had about, like, okay, you weren't ready for this fight, and that's fine. It was on 2 days' notice. I don't know if our walking around weight should be 315 regardless of when you have a fight coming up. So I think that there are a few. This did not help Martin Bacoli in any way, shape, or form. It has a lot of questions around him. And now it sounds like they're still going to try to do the fight with him out in May, but there is now a lot of pressure on this guy to look very impressive in that next bout, because he got dummied here against who is a very high-level fighter in Joseph Parker. So we will now see what comes from that one. But a strong showing from Joseph Parker, albeit not with the most resistance. So that is how I saw things go down out in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Overall, just an unbelievable day of fights. It was a little long. And that was one note that I had, was you're watching it and you're seeing it was too much of a good thing, was basically what it was. You watch Smith Beterbiev, it's like, man, this is a cracker. This is a fight of the year candidate. This is great. Zhang against Kabayel, this is awesome. There's a chess match going on here. Big bombs being thrown. Okay, this is great. Madrimov against Ortiz, there's a puzzle that Ortiz has to figure out. Madrimov, but these are two very high-level fighters going at it. And then you get to Adama Shiraz, it's like, we still have 4 fights to go. This fight, it's good. It's good, but I'm kind of exhausted. And I said to the guys I was watching the fight with, I need like a minus 800 fight right now. Like I need there to be a bit of a spot where I am not so emotionally invested and so focused on this fight for just a little bit. I need to watch and be entertained, but know that a finish is coming at some point and that it's not overly in doubt. So I think we found that 4 was the max. 4 very good fights on a boxing card. We can roll with that. I don't know what I would have done if Stevenson Padley and Bacoli and Parker didn't end up having the illness issues that they had, because it did kind of set things up so that, okay, I'm mentally refreshed now going for that main event. It's a thing that pro wrestling has done for a really long time, where you have like a big match and then we have a bit of a let me up, and then a big match and a little bit of a let me up, so you can kind of pace it a little bit instead of just redlining that thing. And now boxing, it has been 3 let me ups in a main event, so I will take this over that. I will take too much of a good thing over not enough good things. But yeah, it was wearing on me by the time we got to Adamas against Shiraz. But overall, a great night of fights, and sets up now, as we kind of discussed, it sets up a lot of very, very intriguing options down the line. We're going to be breaking those down here on YouTube and in the podcast for as the week kind of rolls on. So normally we do pound for pound rankings at the end of a fight week, like on the Wednesday after. But because we have another pound for pound fighter in there, we're just going to not do that this week. But we are on Friday going to do Thursday or Friday. We are going to do the fights to make coming out of this gigantic card. The UFC had some fights to make, as they announced a boatload of fights last week. So much so we had to react to it. So here are a little bit of a breakdown of the UFC news that we were just flooded with over the last week. The UFC went just wild announcing fights over the week. So let's break some of these down, shall we? The big news, I think, coming out of all of it is Ilia Topuria is vacating the championship in the featherweight division and moving up to 155 pounds. Apparently, with a fight with Makhachev isn't a guarantee right away, but I still don't mind this. Topuria has beaten the biggest names that there are at 145 pounds, and so let him be great. Let him go up, try to do his thing at 155 against Islam Makhachev, who you do have limited time with. Get this fantastic champ v champ matchup now, and Instead of, oh, we missed our window with Makhachev. Like, no, let's go do this now. And you still have enough good fighters at 145 pounds, and honestly, this opens up a few other good ones to potentially get an opportunity at a championship. And so I think this is a solid move. And apparently the big talk coming out of this is that the UFC doesn't want double champs anymore. And I can understand that. Like, it does kind of hold things up in divisions. And when you have a talent-rich kind of area like 155 and 145 is, I don't think you want to be doing a whole lot of holding up right now. So I think that it makes a whole lot of sense. And it does open the door now for Diego Lopez to take on Alex Volkanovski for the championship at 145 pounds. Lopez is a really, really exciting prospect and has just been knocking everybody out. Volkanovski is the old standard at 145. So this is a very fantastic fight and a good bit of matchmaking here for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. UFC 314 got a bunch of fights, including Paddy Pimblett taking on Michael Chandler at 155 pounds. Pimblett, he gets another veteran to kind of work his way through here. This one is a step up, though. Like, I don't think Chandler is going to be in title contention, but he is still a step ahead of where Bobby Green was and where Tony Ferguson was. So there is, I think, still a test here for Paddy Pimblett to see where is he. It is a big name, and they are trying to build up Pimblett as a big name. So this makes sense for him. For Michael Chandler, again, he has lost 4 of his last 5. He still feels like more of a threat than the other guys, but that threat level is fading. And I think a loss here against Paddy Pimblett, and we are really talking about, like, what are we doing here? And there's one fight left for him, probably. We'll talk about that in a second. If a loss happened, win or lose, honestly. But, yeah, it is a fight for relevancy, I think, for Michael Chandler, because you can be exciting, and we can feel bad about the layoff all we want. You got to win, though. And he hasn't been doing a whole lot of that lately. Patricio, Pitbull, is going to be making his UFC debut against Yair Rodriguez. This should be wild. Pitbull is a Bellator legend, bringing some all-action fights, and that will include a fight with Yair Rodriguez. It does feel like we are setting up for Pitbull against Chandler. It was a hellacious rivalry out in Bellator. The guys legitimately don't seem to enjoy each other's company. And so I think we are kind of building towards that win or lose, honestly, for both of these guys. UFC 315 in Montreal gets a couple of title fights, albeit not the biggest names, as first, it's Belal Muhammad defending the welterweight championship against Jack Della Maddalena. Belal has been kind of upping his trash talk game a little bit lately. It is a bit surprising it's not against Shavkat, but Rakhmonov saying that he is dealing with an injury. And JDM, he's been on a great run. It includes a good win over Gilbert Burns in his last fight, getting him into the title picture here. So if it wasn't going to be Shavkat, the timing wasn't really adding up for Belal. Get him another fight. Put it in Montreal, a very strong fight city, and let's go to work and see what they can get out of that one. Valentina Shevchenko will be defending her flyweight championship against Manon Fiorot. Fiorot has been beating a number of top contenders, and so at some point it's just like, well, I guess she is the top contender now. Interested to see what Shevchenko has as she now gets to focus on an opponent that isn't Alexa Grasso, which has been kind of her focus for the last year and a half. So really exciting to see what she does with a new challenger here. And there is a immediate challenge to the pound-for-pound throne that she sits on right now with Zhang Weili, beating Tatiana Suarez, and now kind of pushing up on that number 1 spot, pound for pound. So Shevchenko with a chance to really solidify that when they get to Montreal. Also added to UFC 315, it is Alexa Grasso taking on Natalia Silva. That's been added to the UFC 315 card. Grasso with a chance to kind of show what she learned after a very tough showing in the trilogy against Shevchenko. It was a bit of an underwhelming performance for her. And so that there needs to be some growth now, because that was really underwhelming for a trilogy fight for Grasso. Silva gets a good step up here after winning 8 in a row, moving up in the rankings in the women's flyweight division. I think that this is a good test to see where both of these fighters are at right now. UFC London getting a new main event as Sean Brady takes on Leon Edwards. Brady is coming off of a couple of good wins over Gastelum and Gilbert Burns to get what kind of looks like a title eliminator. It is not a soft landing spot for Leon Edwards coming off of his loss to Belal last year. So a chance, I think you're creating a challenger out of this either way. Now, that depends on what Shavkat is doing with his injury. If he is still around, then that is still the fight that you make. But if Shavkat's injury is a little bit more long-term, it puts now Brady or Leon Edwards right in line for potential championship fight opportunity. One other bit of fight news. We didn't, just based on how the last couple of weeks have gone, we haven't really had a chance to discuss UFC 312 on this program with Dricus du Plessis picking up a victory over Sean Strickland. It was an underwhelming performance from Strickland, and now he and his coach, Eric Nixick, are parting ways. And I think this makes a lot of sense for Nixick. He was giving very clear, urgent, but obvious instructions to Sean Strickland, and Strickland was obviously not going along with them at all. He was yes-sirring in the cage, but then he was going out and implementing exactly none of it in the octagon. And that, if I'm a coach, I'm like, look, man, I'm here to coach champions. This guy wasn't fighting like that, and so I need to be done. I don't think it needed to be as public as it ended up being, although a lot of things with Sean Strickland are. And it is kind of putting Strickland on the defensive a little bit. And he has been very vocal about a lot of things. Not all of them are easy to support. And so being tied to that guy is probably honestly a little exhausting anyway. And now you have him not fighting at the level that you think he should be fighting at and not following the instructions you think he should be following. Why would you stick around with that guy? So I think a good move here from Nixick. And again, Sean Strickland is going to have a lot to prove in whatever his next fight is going to be. So we got a lot of UFC news and just kind of wanted to run through that there. Let's go into the world of professional wrestling now, as WWE had a big announcement for New Orleans as WrestleMania is coming there. To deliver it, it was The Rock. And he had a little bit more to say that may have implications on WrestleMania this year. Let's discuss as we look back on SmackDown. WWE SmackDown came to us from New Orleans on Friday with the tease late in the week that The Rock was going to be there. The final boss announcing where WrestleMania 42 is going to be, but also maybe announcing some intentions for WrestleMania 41. Let's break it down. I saw some people saying that, you know what, I actually thought The Rock's promo sucked. And so I watched it this morning here, and I was kind of bracing for it to not be great and just be kind of another NXT thing. And it, like, he kind of bounced back and forth, right? Like, he did the corporate announcement, like, hey, WrestleMania, finally, it's coming back to New Orleans. Hip, hip, hooray. And then we kind of get into final boss mode, and then he gets out of it, and now he gets back into final boss mode, and then Cody comes out. And then I thought from there, what was the actual execution of the promo perfect? I mean, wasn't bad. And I think it is actually a very, very interesting kind of introduction to what could be a fun storyline here with The Rock, either leading up to WrestleMania or even leading up to WrestleMania 42. And I think it could play into a couple of other things, because Cody, in the lead up to the Royal Rumble, there was the promo with CM Punk, and he was like, "Are you my friend?" And it just, he looks like this exhausted champion, and it's just like, I got my friends coming after me all the time. Like, why do I trust any of you? And so you have that, and then he beats Kevin Owens, and that's kind of gone away a little bit, but you know that that's still kind of there. And you have The Rock now come out and cut this promo like, hey, I'm with you. Like, all your friends are going against you. I want to be your brother. I do. I want that soul, Cody Rhodes. I want your soul. So jump on with me, and I'll take you to heights you've never seen before. What loyalty do you have to these fans, Cody Rhodes? What loyalty do you have to your friends? Because they're all turning on you. I think you can tell a very, very fascinating story with that. Because it's all like, before the CM Punk promo, it kind of felt like it was that this would be obvious. Like, no, he's not going to do that, and we're going to set up some kind of Cody Rock thing. I actually do think there's a couple of different ways you can go with that. Like I said, you can do look, all your friends are turning on you, come with me. And now all of a sudden, you have the Corporation 2.0, right? It's The Rock in charge of everything, and it's Cody as the Homelander, basically, as the heel champion, and trying to work through things that way. I think that would be a very interesting dynamic. And I think one that would be pretty fun to steal the Rock phrase, kind of follow along for the ride that they're taking us on. And so again, I think it makes the Netflix promo make a little bit more sense, which I'm telling you guys, and maybe this is me just trying to hold on to that, but I didn't think this thing with Cody and The Rock was over, even though it kind of felt like it at the time. I feel like this kind of loops it all back in, and he's trying to be nice to this guy because he wants him now in this Rock stable that he has, as The Rock is now trying to formulate his own thing moving through the wrestling world. So I think you could very realistically have Cody turn with The Rock and set it up for a championship opportunity and set up like this new kind of heel group. And honestly, the way you could do it is like there would be some storyline holes in it, but you could have like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens are having this just absolutely breakdown match. And at the end, Sami Zayn ends up getting a win in whatever way. And then Cody comes out and it looks like he's going to congratulate him, but he actually hits Crossroads, and that is the turn. And now it is Cody with The Rock in this new kind of asshole kind of a thing. And maybe you can then even incorporate a Sami Zayn into the championship match there with them at WrestleMania. Or not. That's just kind of spitballing off the top of my head. The other probably more obvious way this goes is Cody says no to The Rock. And now you get this feud again of Rock versus Cody at WrestleMania. And I don't know if you would just go Rock versus Cody at Mania. I think there's definitely a way you could do that. But I also think that this could be an opportunity to really elevate Jacob Fatu. And you could have the Rock be this kind of overseer of this whole thing. And Jacob Fatu can be his kind of guy. And so it is like Jacob Fatu is leading his own group because The Rock's not going to be there as much, but you are still not putting the same pressure on him that you were put on Solo. And Jacob is more ready than Solo was. I think that's very obvious now. But I think that is a way that you can elevate Jacob Fatu into this. It's like, okay, he is now The Rock's hired guy, and now you have Cody and Fatu going at it until The Rock can come back in on some of his other things. So I think that this is actually a really, really interesting development in this storyline and adds quite a bit more intrigue to things at the Elimination Chamber. So I'm quite interested to see now how this all plays out. Let's move over now to AEW as Dynamite followed up Grand Slam. We broke Grand Slam down last week. Let's now run through what we thought of AEW Dynamite. AEW Dynamite looking to follow up a pretty good show from Grand Slam, and I thought they did very well. I thought this was a really, really fun show from AEW. I loved the MJF Adam Page face-to-face to start things off. I thought both guys' motivations were clear. They made sense for their characters. MJF with the kind of constant need for fan validation playing into this really well. It was the classic MJF that I was hoping to see, was mainly the gist of this whole thing. Page feeling bad about what he had done to Christopher Daniels and having that turn him was well done as well. It is difficult to have a guy who, as MJF has said, put a syringe without consent through a man's mouth, the other side and out, and stomped him on a brick and those sorts of things, and lit his childhood house on fire. It's tough to then say, by the way, he's the good guy now. But I think the wrestling fans were ready to cheer him anyway. They're ready to cheer for the guy against MJF, and this was a way to make it make sense. So it is a little bit quick of him being a arsonist psycho into being the good guy that we all love, but that's wrestling, baby. It's going to be a banger of a match, and I hope we get a few matches out of it. It gets MJF away from kind of the seniors division for a little bit. I would imagine there is going to be some kind of Jeff Jarrett tie-in to a lot of this, but we'll see. I was really, really happy with how they set this whole thing up. I think a lot of it made sense and it was very good storytelling, in my opinion. We finally get the good guys getting a moment in the championship picture as Cope gets a measure of revenge on Jon Moxley. I don't know why Cope needed to be the one to take the fall out in Australia, but he did. And now he comes back and it's like, you know what? I'm going to run through all of your guys, so it's just you and me one-on-one at Revolution. I think that is a way to get him some momentum back. I think that it is a way to get the good guys finally looking good in this whole thing. I do think that it eventually leads to Moxley beating him, but I think that this is just a way to get at least a little bit of momentum and at least a little bit of doubt in people's minds about where this storyline is potentially going. So it was good to see the good guys get some momentum finally. The Ricochet Prince Nana segment was perfection. Ricochet has embraced this new character, and he's really getting the most out of it. And Nana explained the robe very, very well, solidifying its importance. And then Ricochet's, okay, take it. Oh, it was so good. Oh, it was so good. At that point, you're fearing for Nana, you're hating Ricochet, all of these different things. Like, this is exactly what Ricochet needed, and showing that this new side of him for the first time ever is spectacular. So I thought that was great, and probably going to lead to another very good match with Swerve Strickland. Orange Cassidy and Roderick Strong, they had a great match together. I thought they told a good story, built to a good finish. It wasn't the best match that these two guys have had, but it was still a fun one nonetheless. It leads with Orange Cassidy getting a win. He'll now face Takeshita for the International Championship at Revolution, at Dynamite, with the winner taking on Kenny Omega at Revolution. It does seem like a long way to get to Takeshita against Omega for the title, which there's a story for anyway, so I am kind of questioning why we needed to do this, but it gets a couple of your very good performers on television, and you don't just go right away to an obvious thing, and like we've kind of said before, that AEW, they have what are very predictable end dates in mind, and they do seem to sometimes try to take the scenic route to it, and they don't build up a whole lot of believability. They've at least built enough believability in this that you could see there being a triple threat match with Orange Cassidy, Takeshita, and Omega, and kind of build it that way. Again, part of it is for the joke, because I think the International Champion and the Continental Champion coming together and forming the Intercontinental title would be funny. But I do think when you see, like we talked a bit about it after Grand Slam, like Okada, who I don't recall being on this show, isn't really doing a whole lot right now and doesn't feel like the main event guy. But we had this face-off with him and Omega for Revolution. If Omega goes out and wins the International title and Okada is there with the Continental, I think you can kind of fix the too many belts issues in AEW and also create a better hierarchy of those mid-card singles championships if Omega unifies a couple of them and then he's holding it for a little bit. And that gives you a gigantic match for All In. Omega, Okada, unifying some championships at All In out in Texas. So I kind of wonder what that's going to be. On the other side, I don't love how much of an afterthought Adam Cole is right now. Like, this guy came in as a huge star, obviously some injury issues, has come back. A lot of comments on the internet about how my guy looked in his kind of returns here, but this is still one of the better characters that you have, and he has he is a background character for sure in everything right now in AEW. So it's how deep this talent roster is that guy kind of gets pushed back a little bit. But I do also think that it's a bit of a waste of money that you have all these big names making all this money and we can only utilize X amount of them so far. The hardcore match was what it was. It gets Hobbs a win. There were some big moves. There was a big table break. It was fine. Crowd seemed into it. It wasn't my cup of tea, and I don't hate the big plunder matches every now and then. It never felt like this one really got going, in my opinion, but it gets Hobbs a win, and hopefully it kind of puts an exclamation mark on this feud, and we can start to build him up a little bit more. Again, Ops Against the Patriarchy was what it needed to be. Hook put on a good show. Christian was a weasel. Hopefully we can kind of move on a little bit. Now we get to the bad. And I think if you watched Dynamite or saw any of the clips online or any of the reaction online, you know where I'm going. The fuck was that Penelope Ford, Megan Bayne, Thunder Rosa thing that they did? Like, obviously someone missed a cue, because Thunder Rosa is just like out there and like kind of fake throwing a chair, but no one has their hands up, and so she doesn't want to just wallop these people. But so either someone missed the cue that they were supposed to grab the chair, or they were supposed to run out, or she was supposed to just threaten them and go check on someone quickly. But it came across so badly. And like I like Bane. I love the direction of putting her with Penelope Ford. I think there's a lot there. And I think Thunder Rosa, there are some criticisms of her for sure, but I think it's an interesting character. And so having them all kind of together in the same universe, I think makes a lot of sense. But this was a really bad start to that whole thing. Positive on the women's side, you get Momo Watanabe challenging Mercedes Moné. That should be a whole lot of fun and just a very good wrestling match. It is weird that someone won a chance to challenge for a championship and they pick a secondary one, but it'll be a fun match and probably a good couple of weeks here building up to it. And then the Toni Storm promo was fantastic. She is so entertaining. It doesn't build to a whole lot, and then on Collision, Mariah May attacks her again, kind of escalating this feud one more time. But it was fantastic. It was entertaining. You don't need to have any idea what's going on in wrestling in general to watch that and be entertained by it. She is one of the best and one of one. She is timeless. Tony Storm. All right, that is going to do it for the doubleheader here today. Thank you guys so much for hanging around. As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca for your great Calgary swag. If you need a little bit of fuel, it is great to go to Swift Energy. Check out swiftenergy.gg. Use that code PKPrimetime for 25% off. We'll be back tomorrow on Monday with the live stream. Back up again running with the podcast. This was more to make up for some stuff we missed last week rather than getting ready for Monday. So thank you guys so much for hanging out today. Talk to you guys next week, which is tomorrow. I'm out.